Yeah.
Weird Realities Network presents Blondes, Books, and Campfire Tales, where we pull up a log, roast a marshmallow, and settle in as these two blondes talk spooky tales, urban legends, and classic horror icons. Exciting guests, perky blondes, and sinister tales makes this podcast as good as a double stack s'more. So let's join Bethany and Krystal as they gather around the campfire in Blondes, Books, and Campfire Tales.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Blondes, Books, and Campfire Tales. I am Bethany. We have Krystal. Hey, I did it the right direction this time.
Yay!
And then I just want to introduce everyone to Vic. I didn't ask how to pronounce your last name. How do you pronounce your last name?
Car.
Okay, like Ferrari. So Vic, he is a retired New York police detective, and he turned author into funny behind-the-scenes stuff about being a New York police detective. So Vic, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you here.
Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it. And that double thick s'mores, which sounds good about now. I need that sugar rush.
Right. Mike has joined us. Welcome. Hey, Mike, how you doing? And then, wow, I don't know. I totally lost my game right there. Okay.
I just watched you lose your track of thought.
I did. No, because what it is so Vic, I don't know if you've seen any of our episodes, but my cat Indy likes to join every conversation for some reason, and instead of joining, he just walked behind everything and he started to move my things. So that's where my whole brain split right there. So sorry about that, but y'all are used to my introductions here. Mike, I'm splitting my brain between you all in the debate. So, anyway, welcome to the show, Vic. Sorry for the introduction that got all messed up.
No, it's fine.
But do you want to talk about your books a little bit, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty of the stuff of why we're here and learn about all the fun stories that you have for us?
Sure. My name is Vic Ferrari. I was born and raised in the Bronx. I had a 20-year career with the New York City Police Department. I always knew what I wanted to do when I was a little boy. I always tell the story. My friends and I used to sneak into the post office at 10 years old and steal the FBI wanted posters out of the post office and go around the neighborhood and conduct manhunts. You know, there'd be some poor guy in a deli waiting to get his sandwich. We'd be looking at the poster. That fucker could be the guy wanted for that bank robbery in Louisiana. I always knew what I wanted to do since I was a little boy. And by age 20, I took the exam. I went into the police academy and I had a wonderful 20-year career with the NYPD. I worked in a lot of different units. I worked in a plainclothes, like a decoy unit. I worked at a DUI unit, which I absolutely hated. I worked in the Manhattan North Narcotics Division doing buy and bust operations. And my last 10 years, I was a detective in the NYPD's auto crime division. So anything with chop shops, stolen vehicles, exporting stolen vehicles out of the country, that was my thing. I also did a little bit of dignitary protection. So what they would do is from time to time, pull us out of our assignments. We'd go in a suit and tie and we would guard foreign dignitaries with the Secret Service or the State Department. I retired from the NYPD and I got into writing. I've written a series of books, 4 of which are behind the scenes look at the New York City Police Department and the ridiculous things and the irony that goes on behind the scenes.
Nice. That definitely sounds fun and exciting. I know Krystal and I were kind of checking out your books. A lot of them are available on Kindle Unlimited right now, right?
Yeah, all of them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's perfect.
Like my Kindle Unlimited is maxed out right now, though, which means I need to read some of them, I guess.
I feel like it's not unlimited then. That's very misleading.
No, you can only have 20 books at a time.
Oh, Krystal, you got to thin the herd.
I don't do that with books.
No. My to be read pile is 7 years long.
Yeah, pretty much.
Londa says hi. Welcome to the show, Londa.
Hey, Londa.
So what made you decide to start writing about your experiences?
Boredom. When I retired from the police department, I moved down to Florida and I figured, you know what, I'm going to get back into law enforcement. So I got my accreditation and I became a police officer in Florida for a cup of coffee, 6 to 8 months. And I hated it because I went from investigating organized crime in the largest police department in the world, going back on the road in my early 40s and being on the road in uniform is a young man's game. And it's back to the drunk drivers. It's back to the domestic violence. It's back to the disputes. And it's different in Florida than New York. Like in New York, we have crime. In Florida, we have alligators. And I remember during my training, I spent a half a day learning how to wrestle. I guess it's called wrestling an alligator. And I said, can't we just fucking shoot these things? They said, no, You got to get duct tape and sneak up behind them. I'm like, I'm not doing this. Like, I'm not messing around with some Jurassic Park looking thing. And it just was a bad episode of Reno 911. And after about 8 months of this, I said, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. I re-retired. And my friends and family said, you know, you got all these stories and you know how to tell a story. Why don't you just start writing books? I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. And I wrote 1 book. It started selling 2 books. And now I'm up to my 7th book. It's worked out for me.
Nice.
Nice.
So,
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to be wrestling alligators either. I would quit that job pretty quickly.
Oh, I wouldn't do that.
I wouldn't do that. But did you? Did you wrestle an alligator?
No. I almost shot a coyote, which that's a funny story. A coyote got hit by a car on a midnight down here in Florida, and it was limping around with one paw and the hoof or whatever. And it was in back of a church, and the church had a preschool that was going to open in 45 minutes. And you got this coyote running around, and the coyote is trying to dig under a fence. And one of the things they taught us is you could shoot in Florida, not New York. You could shoot a wounded animal that poses a danger. So I said, all right, I'm going to shoot the coyote. And I'm a dog lover, but I did not want to take the risk of a child getting hurt. Yeah. And one of the cops came over and goes, oh, the sergeant loves animals. He's going to get pissed off if you shoot this coyote. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? Animal control isn't going to be around for another hour and a half, 2 hours. So I said, I'll tell you what. I looked at my watch. I go, he's digging at that fence pretty well, which there was a nature preserve behind it. I go, if he can get underneath that fence in the next 45 minutes, I'll let him go. Otherwise, he's got to go. Coyote on 3 legs dug its hole and went underneath the fence and never saw him again.
Oh, nice. He probably heard you say that. He's like, oh, shoot.
He's like, I don't want to die.
Oh my goodness. So you said that you were a decoy. What did you do as that? What did you do?
Well, it's called anti-crime. I said decoy because people would more associate it. But what we did, we rode around in an unmarked car, plain clothes, and we would watch and surveil guys. And it wasn't like deep undercover or anything, but it gave you that extra couple of minutes to sneak up on somebody. And sometimes we would just like hang out in a train station or a park, pretend like you're a vagrant and just hang out and see A, if someone tries to rob you, or B, watch somebody else get screwed with it. You could spring into action.
Okay.
What was your first takedown? Do you remember that?
What, my first arrest?
Yeah. Or like just something that was like you stood out, you went home and you were super excited to tell someone about it.
Oh, I was scared shitless. So
well, that's
you go through the police. You go through the police academy, and for 6 months, all they tell you is, you know, doom and gloom. Don't screw up. You're going to get fired. And I was. It's funny because I was very in field training after the academy. Back then, things have changed, but back then, they would put you in a field training unit with 50 other rookies. They would sprinkle you. I was in the South Bronx, so they would sprinkle you on foot posts in the South Bronx, and it was baptism by fire. You really had to figure things out. And I remember standing on a street corner, and this is in the middle of the 80s during the crack epidemic hit New York. You got crackheads walking by with shit they stole and people running up to me speaking Spanish. Like I took a remedial Spanish class in freshman year of high school. I don't know what these people are saying to me. So I was overwhelmed. And I was reluctant to make arrests because it's just the amount of paperwork. And it's very, if you don't know how the system works in New York, it could be overwhelming. And I didn't make many arrests in field training. And I remember my sergeant saying to me, hey, Ferrari, you got to get on the sheet. You got to make an arrest. I said, okay. I'll never forget. It was a Sunday night. It was late. We did a 4 to 12. And they picked us up in a van to take us back to the precinct. And as we're driving, there's a dump truck off to the side of the road. And the cop that was driving had a couple of years on. He noticed it. He goes, why is a dump truck out here on a Sunday night? So we pulled up, a bunch of us got out of the van, and here comes this guy walking out of a crack house. So the cop with a couple of years experience says, why is this truck parked here? He goes, oh, I just had to stop and get something. The guy had a clenched fist. And the cop with a couple of years on says, what's in your hand? He goes, I bought a couple of vials of crack. So who wants the arrest? So I says, I guess I should. And it was a friggin' nightmare because in New York, when you make an arrest, you go to the precinct, you got to stand in front of the desk. You don't touch the prisoner until the desk officer acknowledges you. You got to go through their pockets. You got to fill out this long form, count all their money out. The desk officer's asking him questions. Then you put cuffs back on him. You march him into a cell. There's tons of paperwork. You're married to that person until you lodge them yourself down at court. And everybody left. So here I am, this 21-year-old kid that doesn't know what's going on. I don't know. They don't teach you the paperwork in the police academy. I'm standing there with my thumb up my ass. Thank God there was a couple of veterans that took pity on me after like 3-4 hours and finally helped me out. But I was reluctant to make arrests early on.
Well, going back to your coyote story, Londa says, and he'll just fine going on to live a long, happy coyote life.
I agree with Londa on that one. It's my decision on what happened to that coyote.
That's my Wile E. Coyote story.
Right. Until he met the Roadrunner, you know. So, but that's pretty fun. I think we always I think all of us have ideas of just like a crazy situation and you jump in and be the hero, but you never actually know what you're going to do until you're in that situation. Like, I feel like I would just hide. I would just.
Okay. You're talking about wanting to be the hero? In my book, NYPD Law and Disorder, the opening chapter is embarrassing moments. And that's about ridiculous things that happened to me that I was mortified with. So it's the early 90s. My partner and I pull over this car. It's a gypsy cab. Gypsy cab is a 4-door car. It's usually driven by an illegal alien and no license, no insurance. And they cruise the bus stops and the subway stations. And the commuters get out and you give them a couple of bucks and he takes you to your destination. Well, we had a series of cab robberies in the precinct. So this cab drives by. There's 3 guys in the back seat and one's got his head. He's over the front seat with his head next to the driver. So I told my partner, I go, pull that cab over. I think they're getting robbed. Put the lights on. The cab starts burning lights. I'm like, all right, this is great. We got a cab robbery. Finally, we catch the cab in traffic. We run up on the sides of the car right from the back. There's 3 guys in the back seat with a shopping bag, and they're passing the shopping bag around. Inside the shopping bag is 4 kilos of Coke.
Oh, gosh.
So like, this is friggin' great. I'm like 23 years old. I'm on top of the world. I lock them up. I come into the station house. I'm parading around with the kilos like I won the Stanley Cup. Everybody's coming up to me. You're going to narcotics. This is a great arrest. I'm taking photos with it. Great. The drugs go down to the lab. The bodies go down to court. In New York, when you make an arrest, you got to go down that day to speak to a district attorney to file charges. Well, the Bronx courthouse is in a shitty neighborhood, and after 5 o'clock, it's a ghost town. There's really no place to eat. But they had just opened up a food court across the street. So I said, great, you know what? I'm going to go get something to eat. Then I'll talk to the district attorney. So there's a little Italian restaurant in this food court. I get veal parmesan and spaghetti. I'm sitting there. I'm on top of the world. I'm pounding my chest. I'm in uniform, right? Next thing you know, my stomach goes. And I'm like, oh, boy, I got to take a dump. Well, the bathroom across the street in the courthouse is a dungeon and often doesn't have toilet paper. But I'm like, the food court, it's just going to be like a cathedral. It's brand new, right? So I go into the men's room. I'm in uniform. No one's in there. It's antiseptically clean. I go into the stall. I take off my gun belt. I put it on the hook on the bathroom door. I drop my pants. I'm getting ready for liftoff. And the next thing I know, the bathroom door kicks in and I hear like 5 teenagers run in. And they're turning on the sinks and they're hitting the hand dryers. And like, oh, shit. This is all I need, right? Yeah, I'm in uniform, but I'm quite vulnerable with my pants down to my legs, right? So all of a sudden it gets quiet. And I said, oh, maybe they left. Or maybe they saw there's a cop in here and, they just decided to knock it off. Let me hurry up. Something told me to look up. And as I looked up, one of the teenagers had snuck into the next stall, climbed up on top of the toilet, and he's reaching over the stall trying to grab my gun belt. So I said, oh, shit. So with my left hand, I try pulling up my pants. With my right hand, I grab him. And now I'm in a hockey fight because I got him around the neck. And when I pull him over the stall wall, he grabs the gun belt. And I'm just punching him in the face. Let go of the gun belt. Let go of the gun belt, right? His friends run into the next stall and grab his legs. Now I got to tug a war with a teenager on this wall with my gun belt, right? Finally, he lets go of the gun belt. It hits the floor. They go running out. I pull up my pants. I snap my gun belt on. I run out into the food court, and there's like this 300-pound porter with one of them floor buffing machines, and he's got his Sony Walkman on. And I go, Poppy. I'm like waving in front of him. I go, takes his earphones out. He burps. And I said, have you seen a bunch of teenagers run out of here? And he goes, no. So in my book, I said, what should I have done? Call the police on myself? I would have been the laughing stock in the Bronx. Every time someone would have saw me at court, that's the guy that almost lost his gun belt. So I kept that story to myself for 30 years until I got into writing.
What I love about this story ended on a completely different level than it started on.
I was on top of the world, and I was almost in the toilet.
Yeah, like just very fast crash back down to earth. Caught with
Story
your
of my life.
pants down.
Oh my goodness.
But like the thing about that story though is like the balls on those kids to actually
Oh,
try
it's
to
the
take your
Bronx,
guns out.
please.
I mean that's fair. So I've only been to New York once. I was there on a work assignment, and anytime I had to go into the Bronx, I took somebody with me. I was like, I'm not going by myself because I'm like going down into basements alone.
Why were you going into basements in the Bronx?
Because I work in insurance.
Oh, okay.
It was after Hurricane.
It's a hobby of hers.
It's just what I do. It was after Hurricane Ida. Is that the one that was a couple years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Irma.
Yeah.
Irma. Yeah.
Irma. Yeah. So like, and I had no idea some of those basements have like a second level basement. You're like,
okay. Do you want to hear some basement stories?
Yeah. Because I was like, that's why I was like, I'm going into the Bronx. I'm going with somebody, especially since I'm like, I'm going to be 2 levels below ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'll tell you 2 basement stories. So one is from my book, The NYPD's Flying Circus, Cops, Crime, and Chaos. So the early 90s, I'm in my 20s. Me and my friends were going to cop bars, and we would run into cops from different precincts. And this one cop was an amateur magician in his spare time, right? So we would go to the bar, and we're talking to girls at the bar, and he would come over and he starts pulling the flowers out of his sleeve and the gold coins behind the ear. He's essentially cock blocking us with magic. So I turn to his partner. I go, get him the fuck out of here. And he goes, listen, he goes, he's the laziest cop in the world. He goes, if he spent half the time making balloon animals in a police car, learning his trade, he'd be the greatest cop in the world. He goes, but he's lazy. Well, a couple of weeks later, the magician and this other cop, they get called out into a basement apartment of a 6-story walk-up. And it's calls for help. Someone calls 911, hangs up. So these 2 cops, the magician and this other guy, go into the basement. There's 2 doors. They go to door number 1. They knock on the door. Nobody answers. The cop goes to knock on the second door, and the magician stops him. He goes, what? We already made enough noise down here. Our radios are on. Our nightsticks. We're making all this noise. If someone was in there, they would have come out. Let's go. So this cop goes to knock again, and the magician tells him, come on, I'll buy you a cup of coffee. So they leave. What they don't realize is behind door number 2, the super of the building was selling coke out of the apartment. Then he got addicted to the coke, and he stopped paying his wholesaler. Well, in the drug world, they don't cancel your cable or send nasty letters. They're going to kill you. And he knew he had a problem because he didn't leave the apartment very often. So they used an old gypsy trick to get him. These 2 Albanian hitmen brought an attractive female. They knock on the door, and they put the girl's face in front of the door. The guy goes, oh, found money. He opens the door. The 3 of them bum rush him into the apartment. They're pistol whipping him. They're beating him up. Where's the money? Where's the coke? He doesn't have an answer. They shoot him in the head. They roll him up in a carpet. They take him out of the apartment, and they throw him in the furnace. So while he's going up like a Puerto Rican fire log, they go back into the apartment, and they're ransacking it behind door number 2. Now the cops are outside, and they're contemplating knocking on the door. So the 2 Albanian hitmen tell the girl, listen, if these cops knock on the door, let them in. Just start yelling in Yugoslavian and point towards the kitchen and lead them down the hallway. When you get past the thresholds of this bedroom, throw yourself on the floor. We're going to come out from behind. We'll shoot the cops. We'll throw them in the furnace because they had to commit at this point, and we'll get out of here. Well, they never knock on the door, and they leave. Well, the super of the building had family. And a week, 2 weeks later, where is this guy? Nowhere to be found. The family goes to file a missing persons report. The detectives get involved. The detectives realize that there was a 911 call there. So they bring in the magician and the other cop, and they start asking them questions. You know, what door did you knock on? Did you see anything? Did you hear anything? No, we knocked on this door. We didn't knock on that door. But the other cop said, you know, it's funny. When we were leaving, outside, there was a car parked on the fire hydrant, and I gave it a parking ticket. That was the getaway car that was registered to the female. They bring the female in. She starts spilling her guts, of course, trying to like distance herself from the story, but in for a penny, in for a pound. So then they locked them all up, and then they had to go back to the building in February and shut the furnace off for 2 days so they could get this this guy's bones and skull out of the furnace. So that story in my book is called Last Night a Magician Saved My Life.
Did the magician have any idea what was going on, or he was just like, it's fine?
No, he's just lazy.
Well, cheers to the lazy magician.
The other basement story is actually pretty funny. So I'm a detective in auto crime. It's later in my career. And I had made a couple of arrests that had nothing to do with autos. I walked into a bodega, which is a neighborhood grocery, to grab a soda. I walked into a gambling den. So I locked everybody up. Then another time I locked up a guy with a gun getting out of a car. So my lieutenant pulls me aside and he goes, love your activity. You got a lot of good arrests. Stick to auto crime. I go, I know, Lou. I says, but it just, I happen to run into these things. He goes, I know, but stick to auto crime. I said, all right. A couple of days later, my sergeant calls me into his office. He says, we're getting killed with these Vespa scooters. You know what the Vespa scooters are. They're like these little Italian motor bikes that these hipster schmucks in the Upper East Side of Manhattan drive around on, and then they park them in front of their building, and then they're surprised when they get stolen. Those bikes. So we were getting hit with a rash of these stolen bikes. So I started running the plate numbers on them, and I realized that one of the bikes was recovered, driven by a teenager that was stolen up in the Bronx. So I figured, okay, it's a bunch of kids in this neighborhood that are going to the Upper East Side. They're robbing these bikes. They're coming back to the neighborhood, and they're tooling around. I'll go up to the neighborhood. I'll pick off a couple of these kids driving the stolen Vespas, and I'll get my sergeant, my lieutenant off my back. We're driving around this neighborhood over by Yankee Stadium. No Vespas. So I said, you know what? I'll bet they're in the basements of these 6-story buildings. In these 6-story walk-ups in the basement, they have a common area, which is usually where people pay extra for storage. Suitcases, snow shovels, there's all sorts of crap down there. And sometimes you come across motorcycles and bicycles, and a lot of times they're stolen. So one by one, I'm going building to building, going into the basement, knocking on the door. The super comes out, and each super is more cooperative than the next. They're actually proud of showing me these subterranean lairs underground. It's like their fiefdom or kingdom. The last building I go to, right, I can smell weed before I knock on the super's door. So I'm laughing because I'm not going to lock this guy up for weed. I just want to see the common area. I'm banging on the door. The door opens. The super looked like Tattoo from Fantasy Island. He was like 3 feet tall with red bloodshot eyes and like jet black hair, like shoe polish. And he's looking at me, and he looked like he saw a ghost. And I said, hi, can I see your common area? Uh-huh. Okay. So he gets the keys, and he's shaking. He's shaking. He's dropping the keys. I'm like, what the fuck is up with this guy, right? And there was this room with these 2 doors that were pressed against each other, and he had an asp on it and a lock. Keeps dropping the keys. Finally, he unlocks the lock, opens the asp, pulls it open, turns on a light, and I kid you not, in this room, there had to have been 100 roosters and chickens running around the floor.
Oh, gosh.
What the fuck is this? And then stocked in cages or pods, I guess, with like the aggressive cocks. They've got like, it was a cockfighting ring that they were like breeding, like a training ground for cockfighting, right? And I'm looking at the super, he's looking at me, and he's like, oh shit. And I'm like, oh shit. And then I'm thinking about what my lieutenant and sergeant said about stick to auto crime. So I go, okay, no Vespas? No. No motorcycles? No. Okay. It's okay. It's okay. All right. Okay. He locks it back up, thanks me, right? I get outside. I get on my cell phone. I call my sergeant. I go, get the fucking cavalry down here. I says, I just walked into like the world's biggest cockfighting ring. What did the lieutenant tell you? Give it to the ASPCA. I go, get the fuck out of here. I says, just get everybody down here. I go, I don't know how we're going to process this arrest, but it's going to be a lot of overtime. The lieutenant left for the day. I'm telling you, give it to the ASPCA. Okay. So I don't know if you guys remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a show on Animal Planet called Animal Precinct on Animal Planet.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
So in New York City, we have sanitation police. We have the ASPCA. They're not cops. They're peace officers. Yes, they carry guns. And the ASPCA police, they go out and investigate cruelty to animal cases, right? And they rescue and save animals. So I call up the ASPCA, and I get one of the guys on the phone that I had watched on TV, and I'm breaking his balls. And he's like, what do you want? And I says, I just walked into this cockfighting ring down on Hawkstone Avenue, and my lieutenant doesn't want me to get involved in it. He's like, oh, this is great. He's like taking down all the information. He says, I'll tell you what, give me a couple of days. He goes, if this turns out to be something, he goes, and we get a search warrant, I'll call you up so you can come along. I said, that's fine. Week goes by, 2 weeks go by. I forget all about this. I take a couple of days off. I'm helping my dad put a fence in the backyard. That's another funny story because my dad goes out and rents an auger. You know what those things are?
Yeah.
It's like a corkscrew.
Yeah.
It's like an electric corkscrew.
Okay.
Mhm.
My dad hit a root and the thing stopped and he's spinning in circles. He
Oh,
looked like he
gosh.
was square dance. I'm like, let go, let go. And he's like, I'm going to break my fucking arm. So when he came around the pass, I shoved him and he fell down. And then he got pissed off that he tore his shirt. But that's another story. So I'm helping my dad put this fence in with the auger, and the ASPCA guy calls my cell phone. He goes, "We're gonna hit that place tomorrow. Do you want to show up?" And I said, "I can't." I said, "I'm still helping my old man put up this fence." I go, "But good luck to you." So a day or two later, I go into work, and it's on the front page of every newspaper. ASPCA police smashes largest cockfighting ring in New York City history. So my sergeant says to me, "Was this what you were talking about?" And I said, "Yeah, you told me to stay out of it." He goes, "Oh, all right." He should have just left it alone. He goes and tells my lieutenant. Now, yeah, my lieutenant didn't want me to get involved in anything but auto crime, but my lieutenant was one of these guys. He always wanted to be. He was like Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump. Like, his whole ambition in life was to be at a press conference. He was always looking for accolades. He always had his nose pressed to the glass, but he just couldn't get in there. And he knew once he found out about this case, he went ballistic because he goes, "Why didn't you call me?" He goes, "This could have been big for us. We could have gotten a press conference." I go, "You said stick to auto crime." So there's no winning in the NYPD. But those are my two basement stories. I was responsible for breaking up the world's largest cockfighting ring and didn't get to go to the dance.
And no credit.
I mean, you got to save all those cocks, though.
I guess I did.
I'm just trying to look at the bright side, you guys.
You were really excited to say that, weren't you, Krystal?
No, like I didn't realize what I was saying until afterwards.
Gotcha.
Anyway,
So
I'm just going to take a sip.
Before we started talking live, you were talking about a guy who tried to hide a body in order to still
He
get
didn't
overtime.
hide it. He moved it. So
Moved it. Okay.
in the NYPD, when somebody dies in a house, an apartment, a building, the police respond and the police conduct their investigation. The paramedics come, they declare the person dead. But whoever shows up has to stay with the body until the medical examiner comes. And the medical examiner is going to come sometimes hours because there's people croaking in New York all over the place. So you could be sitting with a dead body for hours, 6, 7, 8 hours until the ME shows up. When the medical examiner shows up, he's either going to rule it. He's going to ask questions. He's going to look at the person's medication. If it's an 80-year-old woman and she's got heart meds, he's going to call the doctor up. And if he determines it's a natural death, he tells the family, go call the funeral home. And once the funeral home shows up to take the body, the cop can leave. Or if he says suspicious death, you got to hang around until the morgue wagon shows up when the ghouls take the body down to the morgue for an autopsy. So this cop that I knew, very lazy, really wasn't into his job. It was a Friday night. He was going out that night. He was doing a 4 to 12, so he figured he'd have a couple of cocktails after work. He's got a foot post by a housing project. A call comes over, goes up to the 14th, 15th floor. And what it was is you had this elderly man that lived in an apartment by himself. His next door neighbor would check in on him every day. When the neighbor didn't hear from him that night, he let himself in and he found the old man died of natural causes in his bed. Cop shows up. The EMTs show up. EMTs go, "Yeah, he's dead. You got to wait for the medical examiner." So the cop says, "Well, can't you take the body?" He says, "We can't take the body. You know that. We can only take the body unless he dies in public view." This is public view. He died in his apartment. He just died. Mm-hmm. The cop gets pissed off. They leave. So about a half hour later, there's a call. Cop gets on the radio and calls in a cardiac, 15th floor, same building. The same two paramedics hadn't left. They were downstairs eating their lunch. They come running back upstairs with all their equipment. This time, the old man that died in bed is in the hallway. And they go, "What the fuck is this?" And the cop is looking at him because it's the same two paramedics. And he goes, "Oh, you're not going to believe this. After you left, The guy jumped out of bed and went, oh shit, ran through the apartment, opened the door, and then died again on the floor. And they're like, get the fuck out of here, right? So they're arguing with him. Sergeant shows up, and the cop is like swearing on a stack of Bibles that that's what happened. And the medical examiner is like, he's got rigor mortis now. Look, he's in the same position he was in the bed. Someone dumped him out here. So P.S., the cop got suspended. He lost 30 vacation days, and his punishment was getting shipped up to the Bronx, which nowadays he probably would have been fired, rightfully so, and probably would have gotten arrested for doing something with a dead body. But that is a true story.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I don't always want to work overtime either, and sometimes I'm super eager to get out of work, but I mean, I don't usually work with dead bodies, but
I'll tell you another dead body story. So I'm a rookie cop. I'm working in the South Bronx. I'm working at midnight. It's hot. And right at roll call, they say, Ferrari, you got to relieve the 4 to 12 guy. He's sitting on a DOA in this apartment. I said, okay. So they drive me up there. I go upstairs. I relieve the cop. Old man, late 70s, lived alone, died in the apartment hours ago. And, he's starting to decompose. It wasn't a bad one, but he's starting. It's, summer, no air conditioning. All the windows are open. And it's my first DOA. Maybe, no, not my first, but one of a kind. Let's put it that way. So I'm in this apartment and with this dead man, and he died on the floor between rooms. So he's just kind of laid out there. I look at him. And I go over by his TV set, and I'm just looking at his photos, just trying to see like what kind of, I'm going to be spending time with this guy. What kind of guy was he? I'm not rummaging through his stuff, but I'm just looking at, his family life. About a half hour later, there's a knock on the door. Another old man at the door. And I says, you can't come in. He goes, please. He goes, it's my brother. I live upstairs. I'm the one who found him earlier. I said, oh, please come in, right? And he's telling me their life story. They both grew up in North Carolina. They left there to become bus drivers in New York City like 60 years ago. And neither one of them got married, and they have no kids. And these two lived above each other. That's all they had. This man was very upset that he had just lost his younger brother. And he goes into the refrigerator and he pulls out 2 beers. And he opens them up and he hands me one. And I said, oh, sir, I can't drink on duty. Like, I'm just out of the police academy. I'm on probation. He goes, son, I'm not drinking alone tonight. And he hands me the beer. I'm sitting in this apartment drinking beer with this old man with his dead brother, like in the next room. And medical examiner shows up, eating a slice of pizza. Just walks in like a slice of pizza hanging out of his mouth, looks, asks a couple of questions. He goes, yeah, okay, call the funeral home, and he leaves, right? So I make the notifications. I call for another radio car to come pick me up. Funeral home shows up, and as I'm leaving, the old man hands me another beer, and he goes, for the next time we meet. And I was just so taken back by it because I'm saying to myself, does he want me to find him? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's because I took care of his brother. Like, the next time we meet, like when he dies, he wants me to be the one to sit with him. It was the oddest thing.
Oh my goodness.
You probably gave him a lot of comfort, though. Like,
yeah,
we got along just fine. I just really felt bad for him. I was 21 years old, 22 years old. I really didn't have a lot of life experience, so I listened more than I spoke. And I was just kind of taking it all in.
Yeah.
I feel like people above anything else, especially with the passing of someone, they just want someone to listen to them.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I definitely think so. Like, people I feel like that's what I do half the time in my job, is just let people talk and get it all out. Like, people just need somebody to listen to them sometimes.
So you guys want gory?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. This happened to my friend. This didn't happen to me. I didn't see it, but it's funny. But anyway, this woman was drunk and walks out of a dive bar and walks between 2 cars, and a car's passing by and hits her and knocks all her clothes off and blows her leg off. Just knocks her leg off. Just the way it caught her just right. Knocked her leg off. And rookie cop shows up and he goes into a panic. And there's an old-time cop telling him to calm down, like almost like in a movie, like you just want to slap the guy. You got this rookie cop. Oh, my God. So while the older cop is getting on the radio, calling for the sergeant, calling for the highway unit, accident investigation unit, he's talking to the driver. The rookie cop grabs the woman's leg and runs into the bar with it and asks them if they have any ice. And the bar, they're like, what? And he's like, this woman just got hit by a car. I have her leg. We got a packet of ice. We're going to try to reattach it. And then everybody in the bar comes out from down the block and they realize it's Mary, and then you've got all these grieving people out there. But that's a true story. The cop ran into the bar with the woman's leg and he wanted him to pack it on ice.
Oh my goodness. What's funny is right when you started that story, my dad goes, Dad, Mom, and my Aunt Lois signed on just now. Welcome to the show.
Just in time to hear about the leg being
packed on ice.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So what's a story that, I mean, I know you have a ton of stories, but what's something that just when you meet someone and they ask you about your life as a detective, what's a story that just jumps out that you love to share with everyone?
Oh, I got so many. Again, early in my career, I'm working in north part of the Bronx, and we're in uniform, and we get flagged down by 2 young nuns. And in that precinct, you had 2 colleges, and you always had sororities and fraternities pulling pranks to get into this, initiation stuff. So I thought it was a prank. 2 young women, mid to late 20s, in nun outfits, right? Habits. And they're crying. And I'm like, what's wrong? And long story short, Mother Superior went away for the weekend. So they stole Mother Superior's car from this convent in Westchester. They drove down to the Bronx to do a little shopping. And they parked in a restaurant parking lot that had a sign, if you don't eat here, we're going to tow your car. And they're nuns. Like, they don't go off the reservation very much. So they didn't know the rules of the Bronx. So they got their car towed. So they go to the towing facility. And listen, I hate to say this, but everybody in the tow truck industry is a scumbag. It's fuck you, pay me. And the nuns don't have $100. And the tow guy goes, too bad. And I've got 2 crying nuns on Broadway. So I said, all right, let me go. So I put the nuns in the car. I drive over to the tow yard, and the guy will not budge. And I go, come on, man. Are you Catholic? He goes, I'm Catholic. He goes, but I'm not letting their car out without $100. So I tell the nuns, I'll get the money. So I had $40 in my locker. This is before ATMs and the banks were closed. It was a Saturday. So I rounded up cops in the precinct. I got $100. So I give this nun $100 and I tell her, go get your car out. And she's like, I'm going to pay you back. And I'm like, no, that's not necessary. No, please give me your phone number. I'm going to pay you back. I said, all right. I give her the information, right? She gets her car back. They take it back to the convent. Mother Superior is none the wiser. Now, when you lend somebody money, it's a pain in the ass to get it back. So about 2 weeks, I was living with my parents because I was young. About 2 weeks later, I come home from work and my father's got this big shit-eating grin. And he goes, Sister Samantha called. I said, okay. He goes, Sister Samantha. I go, Dad, she's not a Motown singer. I go, it's a nun. And he goes, what? Why is a nun calling here? I go, don't worry about it. So I call this nun. I call this nun at the convent, and she tells me to meet her one evening by a park that's near the convent. So it's like cloak and dagger spy shit. So I'm like sitting on a park bench in this little park by a lake. And she came, it was like that movie Field of Dreams. Like she came out through some shrubs in her nun outfit with an envelope, gave me $100. And I said, it was just funny. And I said, you're a young woman. She was like under 30. I go, are you happy with the choices? I mean, this is going to work for you? Like,
is this going to work?
You're 28 years old. It's a lot to, become a nun. And she's like, are you happy with the choices in your life? I go, I'm just fine. I found the right job for me. And I kept in touch with her for a while. But you know what? I know I've got her number in my memo book somewhere. I'm going to see if I can look her up just to see what happened to this woman.
If she's still a nun.
Oh, I have no idea. This happened in 93. So 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Crazy.
Well, if she's still a nun, I'd say she chose the right thing then.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, go with what you know.
I'm like, The amount of times I've changed like just the type of job I've had in my life.
Oh gosh.
Definitely
now
not what
you're
I was.
prowling around in basements in the Bronx. So
Yeah.
I hope you found your calling.
I think I did. I think that's, crawling around in people's basements on top of
There you
roofs.
go.
It took a while, but I got there.
Down there.
The what?
Watch out for the fighting cocks.
I know. Yeah, I didn't see any fighting cocks. I saw some really big spiders. And
rats.
Yeah. Well, well, I saw a rat at the hotel, but not in any of the basements. But one thing I did see, like I said, in like the subterranean basement that was like 2 levels below the ground, there was a room, and it was just in the middle of this basement. This basement was a dirt floor with rock walls, and there was just this room built with plyboards in the middle of the room. And the lady's like, yeah, we bought this house a couple years ago, but somebody used to live in that room. And I'm like, there's no lights down here. The roof is like 6 feet tall. You have to hunch over to go down the stairs, and the closest toilet is 2 levels up, and you have to go onto the street to get to it. Like, why would somebody live down here?
My neighborhood, I grew up in the Throgs Neck section of the Bronx, and it always seemed in my neighborhood that everyone had a basement apartment with a relative that lived downstairs that couldn't get out of their own way. Was always the guy that just couldn't quite make it in life, like Fredo, like from The Godfather,
Yeah.
My friend, a kid that we grew up with, his uncle, I used to call him the Pompadour. He had this big mop of hair. He was like a mobster without a mob. It's funny. He used to like push us around when we were little boys. And then you grow up to be better, like, this guy ain't shit, and just used to break our balls. I don't even know why I'm starting to talk about the Pompadour, but yeah, I know what you mean about people live in these basement apartments, and you're like, I wouldn't live down there.
Yeah, I'm like, it wasn't even an apartment. It was just like this little room. Like, it was so weird. And the toilet thing was like really the biggest thing for me, because I wake up to have to use the restroom, like not on a nightly basis, but pretty frequently. And I couldn't imagine doing that in the middle of winter and having to climb up all these steps, go out onto the street. Like,
yeah, it sounds like some Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah. I was just missing the hole.
Yeah.
Or if you had a hole, you wouldn't need to go up there.
Yeah, I was just really happy that I was not alone. I was like, I looked at my friend that was with me. I was like, this is why you came with me, because I don't know what would happen to me if I was in here alone.
Londa. I do. I got my snacks right here. Yeah, we just discovered this thing to put in our things. You guys are lucky though. With your jobs, you have really cool stories. I work retail management, so like my excitement is like lipsticks are on sale. Woohoo! Like that's what I got. Or like my weird Karen stories, and that's about it.
I mean, some of those Karen stories though,
they're pretty interesting. Yeah,
I got a good
they're
Karen
not
story.
like morgue story interesting.
I got a good Karen story. I haven't told in a while.
Oh yeah,
Nice precinct, really nice area. Driving down this area lined with shops, and I see this woman behind the counter of a dry cleaner, and the Chinese people like in this intense fight with her. So my partner and I stop. We go into the dry cleaner, and they're karate chopping her, and she's holding on to this mink coat. Like, stop, break it up. And it's these 2 women. It's a mother and a daughter. And what it is the mother is going through a divorce. The father took her mink coats, brought them to the dry cleaner, put them in storage, and told them, whoever shows up for these coats, I'm the only one that can take them out. So these 2 women mother and daughter figure out where the mink coats are. They go to the dry cleaner, and they're trying to pull them out. So I'm trying to explain to the 2 women, it sucks, but your husband brought them in here. You're going through a divorce. You know where they are. Tell your attorney. This is going to have to get meted out in court, right? The daughter, the mother is somewhat listening to me, but not really thrilled with what I have to tell her. The daughter is just off the hook. She's yelling and screaming and carrying and just carrying on. He says, listen, you're not in this equation. Go outside. Wait outside, right? So she goes outside, and she's just yelling, and you could hear her through the glass, right? And as I'm trying to explain this to the mother, The woman starts pounding on the plate glass window, and the whole window just comes down and explodes.
No.
So I turn to the Chinese shopkeeper. I go, would you like her arrested? And he's like, yeah. So I come outside. She's like, no. And she starts running, right? In snow boots. And it's fun. Like, she's not going to outrun me, right? So I just kind of jog and I grab her, lock her up. And I mean, these were wealthy women, and she went through the system. It was funny putting her in the bullpen, you know, in the Bronx. Yeah, the Hunts Point section of the Bronx, we have a lot of prostitutes, and they round them up. And it was a Friday night. So guess who she was in the cells with in Bronx Central Building? It was Pimps and Hoe night. And she was pissed. Like, and she was shitting bricks. But yeah, it was that's my Karen story.
Now, you said you had some morgue stories. What's some morgue stories?
In the police academy, New York City Police Department at any given time has 30 to 40,000 members. So we hire in bulk. And a small police academy class is 250 cops. A large one could be over 2,000. So what they start doing is early on, they start bringing you down in groups of 40 or 50 to the morgue, because you're going to be spending time down there at one time or another, and they want to see who's going to lose their shit. They want you to be exposed to this stuff. So we go down to the morgue, and I'm expecting, you know, an episode of Quincy. There's going to be a guy in a lab coat, one slab, you know, a guy talking into a tape recorder, or a guy taking notes. It was like going to a Jiffy Lube. It was like 8 bays, and they're cutting, right? Oh, no. And that tool that they use, a wizard tool to cut muffler pipe, they're sawing the back of people's heads and pulling their face off the top and pulling their brains out. And between each slab is a produce scale. I'm sure it's digital now, but remember, like when you were a kid, your mother buys a head of lettuce, puts it in there, 49 cents a pound. Yeah. They're weighing people's organs, and they're goofing on them. Like, this guy's brain is 2 pounds. What a fucking moron, right? And I mean, the smell of death is terrible. And at the far end, I'll never forget, there was some kid that was shot multiple times, and the medical examiner's got this tool that looked like a needle nose pliers, and he's pulling slugs out of the kid's back, and he's dumping them in this metal tin. It's like dink, dink, and hanging over his shoulder is this homicide detective who's eating an Egg McMuffin and drinking a cup of coffee, bothering the medical examiner who just wants to be left alone. And the detective goes, "What do you think?" Medical examiner turns around and goes, "Suspicious suicide," and everybody starts laughing. So it's like, holy shit, like, these guys really have a sense of humor in here. But they teach you a lot of things. So for the morgue, they handed out Vicks, that you rub Vicks under your nose. Another trick I learned from an old timer is if you're in an apartment or a house with a DOA and it's ruled not suspicious, where, you know, you're not messing with a crime scene, look through the kitchen, and if they have coffee grinds, pour coffee grinds in a pot, and then burn the pot on the stove, and the smell of coffee will permeate the apartment to mask the smell of death.
That's interesting.
You know, those could actually come in useful in my job too.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie.
Well, I was gonna say, even with ours, like in our fragrance area, sorry, retail stuff, but in our fragrance area with all the perfumes, we have coffee beans for people to like sniff to clear their palate. But for a while, I just thought we had coffee beans, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then someone explained what they were.
Like, you're doing your shopping during Christmas time, and you're going to the mall, and the women come running up to you and they're spritzing you, and it's like,
oh yeah. No, our people don't spritz us, except for this one lady. She was like, "What does this smell like?" And she sprayed it on me, and I'm like, "What?" Like, I'm selling it to you. So yeah, I smelled like something.
Like, they literally give you little pieces of paper to spray so you can see what it smells like.
Like, she just sprayed it on me, and then she, like, her head came like this, and she sniffed, and I'm like, whoa, like, that was
personal.
Yeah. Try this. Try apocalyptic.
I'm not cannibal. Yeah, that was my icky story. But.
All right, you want to hear another morgue story?
Yeah.
Mid-90s, my partner and I get called out to what we think is a cardiac. We get into this apartment. People are screaming, pushing our way through the apartment. There's a galley kitchen, and I see a set of legs coming out of the kitchen. And on top of the legs is another body. And once we get into the kitchen, the whole kitchen is splattered with blood. And you know, if you ever cut yourself, blood is bright red at first, but then over time, when it's exposed to oxygen, it turns deep brown. And there's blood all over the kitchen. There's a woman laying on the floor. She's been stabbed multiple times, and on top of her is her son, and he's just screaming and wailing, "Mom, mom, mom, mom." So you got to get up. You got to get up. We take him off of her. We put him into the living room, and the place has been ransacked. And I wasn't putting the screws to him. I was just asking him regular questions like, when was the last time you saw your mother? And then things start getting weird. He went from being crying and hysterical to measured. So when was the last time you saw your mother? When was the last time I saw my mother? So he's repeating every question I ask him because he's buying time. Then we're looking around the apartment. Yeah, it's ransacked, but it's staged because when a burglar breaks into your house or apartment, they're dumping shit out on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
They're not taking the time to put the drawers back in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the drawers were put back in, even though it was ransacked. Also, her bag was dumped upside down and then put right side up, which was unusual because they just throw the bag. And credit cards and money were left behind. So what was the point of dumping the bag? So the detectives come. They take him down to the precinct to talk to him. I'm tasked with dealing with crime scene unit, and they're directing me what to voucher and stuff. So in the NYPD, the first person at the scene of a homicide has to go the following day to the morgue to identify the body. So what you do is it's called a 95 tag, or it's a piece of oak tag with a little bit of string, and you write your information, the deceased information, you tie it around their big toe. So that night I go to the precinct and I'm asking the detectives, what happened? Did he give it up? And they says, he knows more than he's saying. He didn't ask for a lawyer, but he wanted to go home. So his uncles were with him, and his uncles asked us, what do you think? And we told his uncles, your nephew knows more than he's saying. We don't know if he did it, but he definitely knows more what he's saying, and he wants to go home. So they didn't want to push him because if he says, I want a lawyer, they can't talk to him, so they let him go home. So the following morning, I get up and I go to the morgue. And at the time, the morgue was in Jacoby Hospital in the Bronx. I don't know, maybe they were between morgues or something. But anyway, skeleton crew. It's a Sunday morning. I go in, and there's a young guy working at the desk, and I hand him some paperwork. I says, I got to ID this body. He goes, okay. He goes into this large refrigerated room. He comes out with a gurney. He pulls the sheet off, and it's a black guy. I said, no, Hispanic female. He goes, oh. Pulls the sheet over the guy's head, walks him back in, comes out with another gurney. Pulls off the sheet. It's a Hispanic wino. I said, dude, I didn't come here to see everybody that croaked in the Bronx last night. I'm here to see this woman. I says, let me in there. So I walk into the refrigerated room, and it was like something out of a horror movie. There's like 6 to 8 bodies and gurneys. Smell is awful. Even though it's refrigerated, it's death. I see my handwriting on a piece of paper on the woman's toe. I pull the sheet off. I identify her. I get back to the precinct, and all the detectives are high-fiving each other. They're all excited. Go, what happened? What happened? The next morning, they got up bright and early to grab this guy, pull him out of bed to talk to him again. And thank God the 2 detectives that went spoke Spanish. When they got into the building, they heard screaming in the hallway. In the hallway, the boy's 3 uncles confronted him, and they were yelling at him, you know what happened to your mother? You better tell us. You better tell us. And he gave it up. He didn't know the cops were in the hallway. And basically what it was he was a crackhead, and she had thrown him out a couple of times and taken him back in, and he was using again, and he was smacking her around and stealing from her. So she told him, that's it. I want you out. He takes a carving knife out of the kitchen. He stabs her to death, takes a shower, puts the murder weapon and the bloody clothes in a bag. And when he leaves the door ajar, hoping some neighbor finds her. So this way they'll call 911, and he'll just show up and go, I've been gone all day. Mm-hmm. Comes back for it. He gets rid of the murder weapon and the clothes, comes back like 3-4 hours later. The door is still ajar. No one's found her. Oh, shit, what do I do now? People have seen me coming and going. I got to do something. So what he does is he gets on the phone, he calls the precinct, then he calls his uncles and starts the ball rolling with this whole thing. But he was convicted of homicide. I just checked recently. He's been in jail since 1994, and hopefully he'll stay there for the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Yeah.
How long ago did you retire?
2007. So
okay,
16 years ago.
So I know you talk about you have the 4 books that are behind the scenes, but you have other books out there too, right? Mm-hmm. What else do you have out there?
I wrote Confessions of a Catholic High School Graduate. It's about growing up in the Bronx and me being a little son of a bitch before I turned my life around. On the cover of the book is a picture of a kid in a Catholic high school uniform getting chased out of a confessional. That's a true story. It did happen to me. confessing one sin too many can lead to a foot chase through a crowded church.
Oh, goodness.
And dickheads and debauchery and other ingenious ways to die. That's about the ridiculous things people do to shorten their life expectancy.
Oh, goodness. Intentionally or unintentionally?
A little of both.
So if you like that show that used to be on 1,000 Ways to Die, probably you would like that book.
Absolutely.
I'm like, that's definitely going to be on my list once I finish one of my other books.
Yeah, you knock that 20 out and then you can get something going on. Well, Vic, it's been really fun having you on here. Definitely enjoyed it. We'd love to have you again. I'm sure you have plenty more stories you can share with us, but we're kind of hitting the hour mark. But is there anything you want to promote right now or kind of share?
Absolutely.
I know you have a podcast.
If you want to know more about you, if you want to hear more stories or learn more, read my books, just go to Amazon, type in my name, Vic Ferrari, like the car. My Amazon book library come up. You ladies were nice enough to put the book covers of all my books out there. Also, I have a podcast called, and it's named after my book, and this is the artwork, called NYPD Through the Looking Glass. It's a podcast where I bring on retired NYPD members that have been in gun battles or worked in the bomb squad or have all these wild and interesting stories. I just started the podcast. I got about 7 episodes up. And if you want to get a hold of me for an interview or have a question, just hit me up on Twitter or Instagram at VicFerrari50, and you can preview all my books for free on Amazon.
Nice. Well, it looks like Mike's already going to check out some of your books right there.
Thank you, Mike.
And I know Krystal and I are going to check them out, and we're probably going to reach out to you again to have you back on because I'm sure you have plenty more stories.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you for joining us. Krystal, do you have anything coming up at all or anything with Mysteries, Murder, and Mayhem?
Yeah, we're not doing it this month.
Okay.
Work's been insane. So I do apologize for anybody that was looking forward to an episode of that this month, but we'll be back with Murders, Mystery, and Mayhem next month. And
you just had with the Wild Women of Weird. I was on vacation, so I wasn't able to join it, but you were part of it, and it was the stalking one, right?
Yeah, we talked about stalking. A lot of that episode was actually personal stories, because out of the 4 of us that were on there, 3 of us all have personal experience with stalking.
Oh.
Which Hadley shared a nice stat that apparently 1 in 3 women have been stalked, and I'm like, well, 3 out of 4 of us have been, so
there you
don't know
go.
how accurate that stat is, but yeah, so that was a really interesting episode. So that's up on all the platforms right now if you want to go back and watch that one.
There you go. Well, sounds interesting right there, and we will catch you guys in 2 weeks. I believe Krystal and I were going to talk about The Shining.
Yep.
In 2 weeks, so probably Shining and Dr. Sleep, which I don't know. I like Dr. Sleep, so.
Who's Dr. Sleep?
Dr. Sleep is the sequel to The Shining that he wrote many years later.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I like it. It has like a whole different, like Overlook is in it and some Shining stuff, but it's basically Danny grown up and his other adventures.
I didn't know that. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. that one was good. And it was, so there's the book, and then it was made into a movie a few years ago too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely good. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on Blondes, Books, and Campfire Tales. Definitely go check out Vic Ferrari right there and all of his wonderful tales as a New York police detective right there. So if you got just a little bit of here on our podcast, but obviously he's going to have a lot more funny, interesting stories right there. So thank you, Vic, for joining us. It was fun having you. And
thank you, ladies. I appreciate it.
Yep. And we will see you guys next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.